All right, so here we are, class. We are going into week 7, and we're going to be covering chapter 8 in your textbook on the nervous system. So the nervous system is one of the regulatory systems in our body. Electrical and chemical impulses make it possible for us to obtain information about our external and our internal environments. These impulses tell us when we feel the wind blow and when to instinctively move as a reflex. There's many impulses that we do not consciously control that help us maintain homeostasis. There's two parts of the nervous system, CNS and PNS. CNS is our brain and spinal cord that receive the information from the impulses. PNS consists of nerves to and from the skin and skeletal muscles. ANS is connected to the visceral organs in our abdomen and works subconsciously. Nerve cells are called neurons and have several different parts. The cell body contains the nucleus and keeps the neuron alive. Dendrites are extensions that transmit electrical impulses. The part of the neuron that carries the impulses from the cell body is the axon. As a neuron sends the signal from one to the next, there's a myelin sheath that is a covering. It's covering the axon that helps to speed up the sending of the signal. There are spaces in between each Schwann cell that is where the signals pause to depolarize and then are sped up to continue on through the saltatory conduction. Okay, so the myelin sheath of the CNS neurons are made by oligodendrocytes and cannot regenerate like neurons. The microglia are a type of phagocyte going around cleaning up debris and pathogens. Astrocytes help to regulate localized blood flow within the brain. The blood-brain barrier is formed by the features of the brain capillaries and astrocytes. The neurons do not actually touch one another, and they use gaps or synapses to continue to transmit the impulse. At a synapse, a nerve impulse is carried by a neurotransmitter. There's 3 different types of neurons. Sensory neurons carry the impulses from receptors to the CNS as a result of detecting the change. Motor neurons carry impulses from CNS to effectors in response to the impulse. Nerves are a group of axons and/or dendrites of many neurons with blood vessels and connective tissue. There are specific nerves that have specific functions, like smell. Some function to give a motor response, like an ANS, and then some do a little bit of both, which we can see in a peripheral of our body. Nerve tracts have white matter inside them, full of myelin, to get information quickly to the cerebrum for interpretation. Polarization is when the neuron is not carrying an electrical impulse. Depolarization is generated by a stimulus. During depolarization of a neuron, sodium ions rush into the cell. Propagation is when the stimulus comes about. Repolarization immediately follows depolarization to complete the action. The spinal cord transmits impulses to and from the brain and integrates for spinal cord reflexes. It's enclosed in the vertebral canal and meninges for the protection. Nerves come out of the spinal cord at different levels of bone and supply nerve endings to certain parts of the bone of the body. For example, a very important nerve comes from C5. It is connected to the diaphragm, and when we lose this connection, we cannot breathe. So as long as you have C5, you're still alive. The spinal cord has ascending tracts that carry sensory impulses to the brain, and descending tracts that carry motor impulses away from the brain. A reflex is an involuntary response to a stimulus that's usually not preceded by the brain, and you just do it. For example, when hit on the knee, below the kneecap, you'll automatically kick out your leg a little bit. Reflex arc is a pathway the nerve impulses travel when the reflex is hit. Receptors sense a change and send that signal up a sensory track for the central nervous system to interpret. And if warranted, an impulse will be sent down a motor track to do the responding. A stretch reflex occurs when a muscle is moved or stretched and our body reacts to that movement. When we step on something or have a painful stimulus, we use our flexor reflexor to pull ourselves away from the harm. So there's 4 ventricles, one on each side, left and right, and then 2 more that go below the cerebrum. The choroid plexus is part of these ventricles and is where cerebrospinal fluid is formed. The part of the brain that regulates heart rate and blood pressure is medulla. Midbrain helps with our reflexes when we see and hear things and helps to maintain balance. The cerebellum helps to regulate muscle coordination, tone in a relaxed muscle, movement, and balance. The hypothalamus is part of the brain with many functions. It produces and releases many different hormones. It regulates body temperature, helps balance how much food we eat, works with our ANS to automatically have organs continue to work, and regulates our body rhythms. The thalamus has functions that go along with sensations and helps to group multiple sensations together to coordinate the information as it is directed towards the cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of your brain, broken down into lobes, which contain gray matter and white matter. Inside different areas are specific traits, which helps name them thanks to their function. There's a connection from one half to the other called the corpus callosum, which helps each side to communicate with the other. Okay, so we know the brain has many lobes that have the specific functions. The frontal lobe is the motor area and generates impulses for voluntary movement. The frontal lobe is also where we have learned motor skills required for a sequence of movement like tying a shoelace. Broca's area permits the mouth and other structures to move to produce speech. The parietal lobes contain areas for receiving information from skin, muscles, and taste buds. Temporal lobe helps to smell and hear, as well as interpreting these things. Temporal lobe also has an area that helps us to remember things that are linked to smells and sounds. The back of the head has the visual area of the brain known as the occipital lobe. This area helps to interpret what we see through our eyes and helps us interpret our surroundings. There's 3 layers of tissue that cover the brain and spinal cord called meninges. The outermost layer is the dura mater and lines the skull and the vertebral canal. The innermost layer that goes around the brain and the spinal cord is called the pia mater. The cranial nerves are a set of 12 paired nerves in the brain. They help the body to communicate senses or movement or both. So the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, is a component of the nervous system that regulates processes like heart rate, blood pressure, respiration, digestion, involuntary processes. 2 divisions of the ANS, the autonomic nervous system. First, the sympathetic division. This division functions to produce localized adjustments. For example, sweating as a response to an increase in temperature. Also part of the ANS is the parasympathetic division, promotes body's ability to relax after periods of stress or danger. It runs processes like digestion. So aging in the nervous system, we lose neurons, which helped us to put together thoughts. We slow down, our reflexes get dull, less responsive, and we lose movement of fluids in our body, which can lead to dry eyes, constipation, and hypotension or low blood pressure. So getting old is rough. This last slide we have here is a list of common conditions seen in the medical field. So you don't really need to know all the differences between them at this time. You'll learn these throughout more of your schooling. You'll get more in depth on these. But that includes the PowerPoint for this week, covering the nervous system and the brain. There are a lot of videos, I feel like, this week added in just as extra resources to watch and help learn and understand the information on the nervous system and the brain. So be sure to check those out too. Thanks.